Hello and welcome to a new Ostrich video, and as you probably know, all the Ostrich aircrafts have names, and today we're flying with the 737-800 named after Hugo Junkers. And so today I want to talk about Junkers. If you hear the name Junkers, you've probably seen this picture in front of your mind, and this is the Junkers 52 M3. And this is probably also the picture you have of air travel airlines in the 1920s and 1930s. If you are from North America, it's maybe a DC-3, but in the rest of the world, civil aviation and airlines usually started with the Junkers aircraft. And this is not surprising because Hugo Junkers was the engineer who probably had the biggest impact in aircraft being used for passenger service. But let's start at the beginning. He was born on the 3rd of February in 1859 in Reit, what is a small town in the Rhine-Ruhr region, and today it's a part of Mönchengladbach. And at this time, and also the decades to come, aviation wasn't a thing. It simply didn't exist, and so Junkers started his career in building kilometers and water heaters, engine, and this sort of stuff. And in 1908 he started to collaborate with Hans Reisner, what was an early German aviator. And this sparked his interest in aviation, and 1 year later, on the 2nd of December in 1909, he proposed his first patent in aviation. And this patent was quite revolutionary. It was a patent of a thick wing, and it was granted in February 1910. And he proposed that a profiled wing wouldn't increase drag and decrease lift to the extent that an aircraft wouldn't be able to fly. He proposed the opposite would happen, and today that's standard, but at the time it was quite revolutionary. And he further stated that this would also allow for the aircraft to be used as a means of transport, able to carry cargo and paying passengers. And at the time when aircraft looked like this, barely able to carry their own pilot, this was a pretty revolutionary idea. So the idea of air transport was born, but at first nothing happened. Everything in Europe was pointing towards war, and in 1914 the First World War started. And this wasn't good for civil aviation, but it really sparked the development in aviation technology because the aircraft was the new weapon of choice for the First World War. And if you think on German World War I planes, Junkers isn't the name that comes to mind immediately. I mean, this probably goes to Fokker and Albatros and so on. But the reason for this is that Junkers aircraft didn't have a lot of impact in the war, but they had a lot of impact in aircraft development at the time. So in September 1915, the Junkers J1 was introduced. And here you can see a picture of it. And if you see it, this is not your typical World War I aircraft. It wasn't a biplane. It didn't need struts or wiring to keep the wings level. And what you can't see at the picture, but this aircraft was entirely made out of metal. Steel sheets to be exactly. Junkers would have preferred duralumin, a hardened aluminium alloy, but this wasn't available at the time. This changed then later with the Junkers J3. Now he had access to duralumin, and he also introduced the corrugated duralumin sheets for the outer skin that will become so iconic for Junkers aircrafts at the time. And now corrugated metal is much stronger than sheet metal of the same thickness, and therefore he could use less material, reduce the weight of the aircraft, and therefore increase the performance of the aircraft. And as they also used duralumin, what was much lighter and much stronger than steel, it also had a profound impact on the aircraft's performance. So now Junkers did also some more developments in the war, but I won't go into it in detail now. And as we all know, in 1918, First World War ended. Germany had lost, and Germany wasn't allowed anymore to build aircraft. What was for Junkers and other aircraft manufacturers a pretty big hit, and the remaining planes got destroyed, the manufacturing facilities got destroyed, and most Hovis employees had to be laid off. And to keep at least some of his employees and keep their know-how up in how to work with duralumin, what by the way is hardened aluminium alloy, what is today known as aviation grade aluminum. And to keep them and to keep their knowledge up, they produced household objects, cutlery, pots, even boats made from this material. But they never gave up in aircraft design, and neither did all the other German aircraft manufacturers, and also neither did the victory powers, because they loved German planes. The Royal Navy, the British Royal Navy, bought flying boats from Rohrbach, what was a German manufacturer, and that wasn't allowed to build aircraft at the time, but they built it in Denmark, so that was this legal loophole. And also Junkers had a lot of offers from practically all relevant powers in Europe at the time to build aircraft in their country, and ultimately he decided for the Soviet Union. And one man who learned his trade in a Junkers factory inside the Soviet Union was Andrei Nikolaevich Tupolev, a name that probably sounds familiar to you. Now, as it was officially illegal for Germans to build aircraft, the license contracts and agreements with our nations weren't quite kosher, to be honest. And this would later be fatal for Junkers, as he now was vulnerable to blackmailing and threatening of treason, what the Nazis would use to kick him out of his company shortly after they rose to power in 1933. But let's get back to aircraft design. Now, after the war, Junkers firmly believed that aircraft should be used for civil transport, to connect people across borders, and this manifested itself in 1919, so just 1 year after the war, when they introduced the Junkers F-13. The F-13 was a really revolutionary plane. It was the first modern passenger plane, and it was purposely built to transport passengers. It wasn't this windy World War I bomber that was just stripped out the bombs and replaced by garden chairs. The pilots of the F-13 were still sitting outside, but its 4 passengers had a relatively comfortable closed cabin with large windows and, very importantly, a heating unit. And this aircraft was one of its kind at the time, and it broke countless records, and that made the aircraft famous worldwide. And together with an American businessman called Larsen, Junkers planned to sell the aircraft in the US, but Larsen claimed he could easily sell thousands of these aircraft in the US, but Junkers never really trusted Larsen, and in the end, his deal didn't get ended as planned. But Larsen organized a lot of promotional tours of the F-13 flying across North America, and this further built Junkers' reputation for aircraft design. Now in 1924, Junkers did his second travel to the United States in hope of finding business partners there and establishing an air service between the US and Europe, so transatlantic flying already. And in his luggage he had the plans for the G1000, and the G1000 was a rather impressive and futuristic looking aircraft, I mean even by today's standards. So you see, the elevator is in front of the main wing and the cockpit, and this was mainly to eliminate the need for a long fuselage, because that would have needed long landing gear, wouldn't be able to retract, and therefore increase drag and decrease the range of the aircraft. And again, if you look at this model, you can clearly see his ideas of the thick wing. I mean, the wing had supposed a wingspan of about 80 meters, so Boeing 747 size around. And it would have a profile length of 10 meters and would be 2.2 meters thick. And this gave plenty of room for passengers, fuel, cargo, and also the engines that would sit also inside the wing and would therefore be accessible in flight. And this gave a flight engineer the possibility to fix a broken engine while flying over the ocean, what is quite a good asset, especially if you think about engine reliability at the time. And unfortunately, Americans weren't that interested in this aircraft, so this project never came to live. But Every other impressive project that did it was Junkers G83, what you can see, and in this aircraft some passengers were able to sit in the wing root, and the wing root had like really large front-facing panorama windows, and just imagine it having front-facing panoramic windows that cover the whole wing root, and this must be quite an experience to fly with this thing as a passenger. And to further promote air travel and air transport, Junkers also founded an airline, the Junkers Luftfahrt AG, in 1921. But as all airlines in Germany at the time weren't really profitable, this airline as well, it relied heavily on funding by the German government, and it accumulated a huge amount of debts. And as the debts were growing out of control, the German government intervened and took control over the airline in 1926, and they merged it with the other big German airline at the time, the Deutsche Aeroleit, and formed a new German airline, which name probably is familiar to you, Deutsche Lufthansa, and Lufthansa at this time is still in two worlds. And now in 1932 the famous Junkers 52 M3 flew for the first time, and it soon became the aircraft of choice for airlines in the 1930s because it was simple, rugged and reliable. For flying it basically needed only two engines. The first versions of this aircraft had only one engine, and this version had three, so plenty of excess power if you needed it. But unfortunately for Junkers and basically for all of Germany, in 1932 the Nazis rose to power, and as Junkers' political views were vastly different from the views of the Nazis, and he wasn't really keen in building military planes for an upcoming world war, the Nazis used his engagement in the Soviet Union to threaten him out of its company and also throwing him out of Dessau, what was the city where he lived for the last years and built up all of his aircraft building companies. So he was forced to move to Bielefeld and used the rest of his life there to develop modern metal houses, which got exported in over 20 countries, and a lot of them still working today, 70 years later, what is quite impressive again. And he died on his birthday in 1935. So now this was a brief overview of the life and work of Hugo Junkers, a brilliant engineer who shaped modern air travel like no other, and he was also one of my childhood heroes and probably one of the engineers who inspired me to become an engineer myself. So now that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a question or comment, just leave it down below as always, and I try to answer them as soon as possible. And all that's left to say now is thanks for watching and see you at the next time. Bye bye.